You're listening to the MBA Success Podcast, featuring a wide range of conversations with the best and brightest MBA alumni. I'm Ross Barclay, and together with our guests, we explore their past, understand how their MBA has helped them achieve their career goals, and gain insight into what success means for them. This podcast is a part of MBA Australasia, the professional body that promotes the standing and enhances the value of MBA qualifications throughout Australasia. Today, I have the pleasure to talk to Brad Meehan, Managing Director of Strativity ANZ, one of the world's leading boutique customer strategy consultancy firms. He's designed and deployed enterprise-level competitive and customer strategies for several ASX 100 companies and government-owned corporations. Brad gained his MBA from Queensland University of Technology in 2007 and has completed Harvard Business School leadership programs in both customer-centric strategy and competitive strategy and change. All right, welcome, Brad, and thanks for coming on an episode of MBA Success. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Excellent. Now, we started the last episode off talking to Jessica, doing a little bit different and jumping into a bit of the backstory of our guests. So I'd love to do the same and just learn a little bit more about, where you're from and how you grew up.
Yeah, I've probably got a different journey than most people. So I was in Sydney till I was an early teenager and then ended up finishing high school in Hervey Bay, which was very nice with the whales and the beach. I then moved down to Brisbane. I got into UQ to do economics and I started that process, but then I realised I probably needed to earn some money as well. So I left uni at 18 after just completing, the first sort of semester, and went and got a role in a direct sales company and spent 4 or 5 years there running teams of salespeople. It was good learning ground, interesting times. And then around about 25, I went to Europe for a bit of travelling. And when I was over there, I started working in more of a corporate role. And when I came back to Australia, I connected with a company called Professional Advantage that sold and implemented large-scale ERP technology solutions with a focus on financial management, budgeting, and also business process improvement. After about 6 years there, I thought that going back and doing some tertiary studies would be valuable. So I enrolled in an MBA. I did an EMBA with QT. Had some good support from the business in doing that. And that sort of got me into that process, which was fantastic. And then when I completed that MBA, David Liddy actually gave the keynote address. He was the CEO of Bank of Queensland at the time. And after that, I just sent him an email saying, maybe we should have a chat. I think I've got some value to offer. And within a few months had scored a senior executive role with Bank of Queensland as their head of customer strategy. So that's a bit about where I grew up and sort of how the EMBA fitted into my early career.
Oh, good. We'll definitely get to delve into a bit of that transition to that customer space a bit later on. But just going back, what sort of drew you to economics? Why was that the degree that tickled your fancy?
Well, to be candid, I grew up in a fairly sort of poor and disadvantaged environment, and I had a single mum and we lived in a housing commission house. And I think that I sort of from a very early age wanted some control over my future and also saw a bit of a path towards economics and business as being related to something that might help me to build some wealth and have some stability. So I think a lot of it was probably that environment. Although in saying that, I've got an 18-year-old boy who's just started studying at uni after finishing year 12, and he's also heading down that path without those same disadvantages. So maybe it's just a natural inkling, but sometimes I think it does have a bit to do with that background. And I was always very interested in the macroeconomic environment, as I am today still.
And despite the fact you didn't do too much of the degree, was there anything that you learnt there that actually did transfer through to some of those sort of early roles that you had, leading teams or thinking about stuff?
Not too much. I think to be candid, I think at 18 I moved out of home with some mates and probably partied on a little bit too much and found that I didn't put the effort into uni, so didn't continue with it. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up taking that different trajectory of working in a sales sort of role and up through an organisation and then circling back to uni later. So I don't think my early career had much to do with that economic stuff, but I think just a broad understanding of how things work is always helpful. And since moving into more corporate roles, I've been an avid reader of the Financial Review, and then I did my MBA. And since that time, obviously at a more senior level, it's very important, I think, to be across how all the parts work together well. And that's, one of the benefits of an MBA is it's not deep, but it's so broad. And it sort of taught me that, you don't know too much about anything, you know enough about everything to work out who you might need to talk to, and gives you an appreciation for just the depth of expertise in all these different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you spent quite a while in sales, and did that come naturally to you as there's lots of different ways to approach sales, I guess, but is that something that, you had to do a lot of selling yourself, or was it primarily sort of in that leadership element?
Yeah, no, in the early days, I had to do a lot of direct sales myself. And I think what happened to me is typical of what happens to a lot of enthusiastic young people sort of that have find themselves in that sales career. I had a good attitude and was fairly articulate, and I did quite well early. And then I realised that there was a bit of a lull, and I didn't really know much about structure of presentation and positioning and closing and some of these really important techniques. Mm-hmm. So I put a lot of time into learning that, and then got quite proficient, and then moved into a role where I sort of had a team under me. And I quite enjoyed the process of working with younger folk and motivating them and giving them a bit of hope about the future and a bit of potential, and, trying to give them some skills that might be useful. So I quite enjoyed that part of it. But it was a real direct sales sort of consumer focus that then laid the path for me to move into the corporate world, where it's really less about, handling an objection and closing, and it's more about, being able to understand at an executive level what's important for an organisation and what might differentiate you as a provider from other competitors. So really important training ground. I mean, you often think, would it have been better if I stayed at uni and pursued and went that way? But, I don't have any regrets about where things have ended up. And I think that's that sort of ability to deal with people and to engage and to understand and read a room and sort of have that EQ thing is very important in what I do today and life in general, right?
Yeah, I can imagine you spend a lot of time in front of people to build up a really decent repertoire of skills in that area.
Yeah, I think they're really good skills, and I think they sort of fed through into the sort of organisation we are today, which is helpful.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you've spent some time in sales, and eventually you sort of start thinking, maybe I'll study an MBA or do an EMBA. Where did that sort of come from? How did you first become aware of the degree MBA? And how'd that evolve?
How did I end up at QT? I think what happened was part of me, and this might happen to lots of people, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s was when I started the EMBA at QT. I think a year or two before that, I was in quite a sophisticated corporate role, and I sort of always thought, geez, it'd be great to have a tertiary qualification, and I'm sure I can do it. I just need to put the effort in. The MBA is obviously a great fit for someone who's 30 and already at a moderate to senior level. I actually went to the QT Open Day. I think my wife was interested in doing a Masters of Marketing, and I went there to pick up some brochures and had a few conversations and said, I think I might do this now. And then I spoke to my employer, and they agreed to fund half of it. And it was a pretty good fit in terms of lifestyle. I had a small child. I was 32, with a 2-year-old baby. And I think at the time we were doing, it was a bit like Army Reserves. I think we did 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. And that worked out pretty well. And in terms of just fitting into sort of a busy professional and personal life. So, and I also suspected that getting into senior management would unlock future opportunities for wealth and success down the track. And I thought an MBA would be a good path to that, and it was certainly the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from having quite a few conversations and being involved with MBA Australasia, it definitely seems that people, like most things, you're either looking to solve a problem by, further education, or you're looking to take advantage of some opportunities. And to your point, when you're young and you're in a position where you can, increase your knowledge in a few areas, and it might unlock a few doors. So that makes a lot of sense.
It probably gives you a nice path out of, I mean, there's a lot of career salespeople, not that there's anything wrong with that, but, whether you're in technology or corporate sales, there's a definite path there that just continues on with account management and maybe running a sales team. And I knew that if I did the MBA, it would probably give me a shift into strategy and management roles, which would open up a different trajectory. So that was one of the key reasons I thought it would be beneficial.
Mm. And was there anything you found particularly surprising during your studies? Was there anything you encountered that you weren't expecting?
Um, I mean, it was probably easier than I thought it would be, just to be candid. People talked a lot about, it's a bit of a divorce maker and it's really hard to have a full-time corporate role and pick up an MBA, but I didn't. I didn't find that. It could be that my corporate role was pretty cruisy. It could be that I was in some good groups because there's a lot of group work. It could be the EMBA structure, and it could have also been just my business experience going in. But I didn't find it too hard at all. And the time flies. One of the guys that works for me at Strativity is just a third of the way through, and I gave him the same advice that you can think about it for years, but get on and do it. It'll be over before you know it. So probably what surprised me was that, and the level I was at, and the sort of lack of workload. I mean, I'm sure you could have delved into everything a bit further. Probably the other thing was the benefit of that breadth of knowledge and the language of management that it gives you. So just, your ability to be across frameworks and logic and methods and across such a broad range really gave me a lot of confidence in almost any situation. And a few people who have done an MBA have said to me, really changed the way I think. And it's hard to put your finger on when that happened, but looking back, I would definitely say that's the case.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was, that ability to start reframing problems, or the way that you think about, some information that somebody's giving you. It just, like to your point, it funnels you down a different direction, but you're not quite sure exactly how you got to that direction, or what it was that sort of seeded that behavior in general, or that thought pattern.
Yeah, for sure. And the group environment was good too. I was with 30 odd fairly senior executives in age between probably 28 and 55. Some worked in engineering, some in technology. There were genetic scientists. It was a really good mix. And I think that group discussion was, really powerful, because I know in the general MBA program sometimes you've got slightly younger cohorts and a larger group, and that discussion can be a little trickier in that environment. This is obviously pre-COVID, but in our environment, you've got 25 to 35 people in a room who get to know each other pretty well, and you can have really broad-ranging discussions. And when you hit a subject that someone has expertise in, they can really add a practical element that complements the theoretical element. Yeah. And I think that was quite good from a learning point of view as well.
Yeah. And so being a decade or so out of that program, are you still in touch with people that you did your studies with? Are you still networking in that realm?
I am. So for the first few years afterwards, we do some camping trips together with families. That's died off a little bit, but I just spoke to someone a couple of weeks ago who's catching up for lunch because they've got a few opportunities I'll be interested in, and I have 3 or 4 good friends that were in those core groups that we certainly stay in touch with. So yeah, that's been a real positive as well. And I think if you can take that format, I know it's a bit more expensive and it might not fit for everyone, but if you can, I think there's great benefit in it. And I don't really have a point of comparison because I didn't do the standard one, but yeah, that was just my experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So you studied your MBA and you transitioned to a customer strategy area, not immediately, from my understanding of your background. But yeah, how did that happened? Was there something during your studies that made you think this is, a really important area of business, or was it purely just an opportunity to say, I just don't think this is being represented the way it should be?
So what happened candidly was, as I finished my MBA and I lived in Brisbane, obviously there's not quite the number of large corporates that there are down in Sydney or Melbourne. So when David presented the keynote at the graduation ceremony, I thought, maybe I'll use this as an opportunity to reach out. Now, because I had background in corporate sales, I had quite a structure and capability to reach out to CEOs regularly and set up meetings. So I just emailed him and said, hey, I've just completed my MBA and I have these strengths around strategy and sales and customer, etc. I think there'd be value in meeting. And we had a chat together and he said, I did an MBA as well. And it really changed my thinking. He then introduced me to a lady who was sort of like his chief of staff, who'd also done an MBA QT. We had a coffee. 3 or 4 months later, they hired a new executive to look after a large portion of bank business. And that executive needed a head of customer strategy. So as he was putting together the sort of role on the shortlist, he was prompted by David or Taryn to say, you might want to interview Brad for the role as well. Seems, enthusiastic, etc. I'd never held a customer strategy role or never really held a strategy management role. So what I did was read a book. I read a book by the guys who set up Yum. They had this really strong principles-based program as to how they do customer experience well across all their brands, Pizza Hut, KFC, globally. Mm-hmm. And I didn't just read the book the weekend before the interview. I genuinely studied it and thought about how I would introduce a customer strategy in the Bank of Queensland. And I sort of built a bit of a mind map. And in the interview, I got on well with Dan. He's a great man, a good friend still today. And I talked to him about exactly what I'd do if you gave me the role. This is how I'd think about the sort of experience we want to deliver. This is how I think about measurement. These are some core principles that I'd embed in the bank. And he said to me, everyone else we interviewed talked about their experience and what they'd done. You were the only person who came in and talked about what you would do if I gave you the role. Now, that was obviously because I didn't have any experience, but he thought that was a much better approach. So he gave me the role, and I spent just short of a year as the head of customer strategy with Bank of Queensland, learning a fair bit and thinking and working through how we might make the organisation more customer focused and how we might improve the quality and consistency of the experience we delivered, and also thinking about the economics and, where does the law of diminishing return kick in and what sort of experience, would better experience definitely create commercial value for the bank, etc. And after about 9 to 10 months, the GFC hit and my multi-million-dollar transformation budget was pulled. And it was saved, to decrease capital management risks. And at that stage, I sort of negotiated a redundancy rather than stay around for the bank for a few years doing standard banking stuff without a change agenda. Yep. I'd learned these skills and I thought, I might go out and start consulting myself. It might be better than trying to get another executive job. So, yeah, that's how I sort of fell into customer strategy. And it was pretty good timing because, as you would know, customer experience is prevalent now, but 20 years ago it was less so. And I think it was good timing and I learned some good skills and that allowed me to go out and sort of set up my own consultancy in this space.
Yep. And you joined Strativity or founded the sort of Australian arm of Strativity. Again, how did that play out? You've obviously got a knack for reaching out to the right people and having conversations and influencing people the right way. So that's not something that you just decide one day that I'll see if I can go and bring someone's business over here.
So what happened was it's a bit of serendipity and a bit of hard work, and I started reaching out to mid-sized businesses talking about maybe I could help you as an advisor around customer, that classic one-man band consultant piece. Mm-hmm. I realised pretty quickly, but that small businesses take as long to approve things as big businesses, but when they approve it, it's a lot smaller. So very quickly I stopped talking to smaller businesses and just started focusing on larger corporates. I actually enrolled in a Harvard Business School program, which was on customer-centric strategy in 2009. I went down to that program and sat next to one of the directors from AMP. And after a few conversations, they offered me a role to come in and help them set up their customer-centric transformation program. So that got me deep into consulting as a one-man band. And after that, I also scored a gig with NAB, helping them assess their strategy in this area. A lot of companies in 2013 were really trying to be customer-orientated, but didn't really know how. It was a bit more of a conceptual buzzword. But then as I was doing the NAB work, a bigger opportunity came up, which would require multiple consultants. And it's a classic business story where they say, hey, look, we know you're in doing a 50 grand piece of work by yourself, but we're looking to run a big project. We have 250K and we're looking to get someone to manage research, design, workshops. Do you have a team? And I said, of course I have a team. And then I went out and found the team, presented the approach, we won the work, and they were my first couple of employees that got going. And then from there, we're able to sort of build over a period of now, 13 years. As I got that team involved, it occurred to me that if there's a significant commercial opportunity, I can either build a brand from scratch or I can leverage a brand that's got credibility. So I read a few white papers and I came across an organisation in New York called Strativity. There's a great Jewish leader called Leo Arussi, who was a captivating sort of fella, and he talked about expanding his brand and IP all over the world. And I signed a franchise agreement to basically launch the Strativity brand in Australia. And instead of having one or two clients, I then had hundreds of clients. And we worked with companies like Mercedes-Benz and Bank of America and Canada Post. And because of that credibility and because of some of the IP and methodology I could leverage, I started winning bigger and bigger corporate projects. And that allowed me, I guess, to get traction a bit earlier and to also learn from a company that had been doing this for 10 years. And in an interesting turn of events, Strativity actually ended up sort of moving away from the franchise model, and I was able to buy out the perpetual rights to use the brand and IP in Australia, New Zealand, and in different parts of the world. So it worked out really, really well. It sort of separated us straight away from every other one or two-man band with a few clients, and it gave our clients in Australia the ability to get a global perspective, because we weren't just talking about what is best practice in ANZ, but we were talking about what's happening in Europe, Asia, the US, etc. And I think that was very helpful in those early days.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. There's so much in that we could dive into a rabbit hole with. The one thing that's coming to mind, and I can't remember where I heard it, is the quote around luck being, you got to buy your ticket to get on the bus. So when the opportunity comes along, you have got to have done the hard work to have earned the opportunity to get on when it arrives. And that certainly sounds like something you've been able to fully leverage, is put in a lot of hard work, do everything, cross the T's and dot the I's, but then the opportunities have come your way because of that, and you've taken advantage of them.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, having an opportunity to interview for a head of strategy role at a bank, albeit a smaller bank, but that's a pretty significant jump from sales into a strategy role. Mm-hmm. So I think, spending that whole weekend trying to get some clarity as to what I was going to put forward was important. I also think that, look, at the time when the Harvard course popped up, it was $10,000 to do it. And at the time, I was trying to get my first couple of clients. I wasn't really flushed with cash. I wasn't down to my last 10,000. It's not that kind of story, but it was a significant amount. And I invested it thinking that having an MBA and then also having the fact that I've done a Harvard course in this area of customer-centric strategy certainly wouldn't hurt. And I suspected I'd meet some people on the course. And because I put myself in that position, I ended up meeting some people. And, there was a $200,000 or $300,000 contract with AMP that came out of sitting next to a director on that course. So my advice has always been, back yourself, work hard, but put yourself in the position where you can create and capitalise on opportunities. And I also think the customer direction was a pretty good fit for us. I sort of had a background in sales anyway, and customer strategy is really a combination of marketing, culture, economics, design thinking, innovation. It's almost like every aspect that you cover in an MBA, if you're across that, you can really talk about how we can use that to understand our customers better and create differentiated value. And that's really what most competition is. So, yeah, it was just, you don't want to think it's too much from yourself, because there's a lot of, sort of luck in that journey I described. But, yeah, you seem to, the old story, you make your own luck if you work hard and you're in lots of opportunities.
Yep, absolutely. Now, we did mention earlier the bit around people skills, interpersonal skills, talking to people, and how some of that sort of seems lacking from a situational awareness perspective. Is there something that you do to give advice to people, or tips in how to approach those things or improve on that? And I guess maybe a preface to that question is, do you think it's one of the most important things that you can learn when trying to progress your career in the corporate space, or just in general?
Yeah, I think for sure, and I think you can develop those capabilities over time, and it's probably important for people that are less extroverted generally. There's lots of highly competent, strategic thinkers with great intellect, but your career can often be limited by your ability to deliver information with confidence and have a certain gravitas in terms of what you're saying. And a lot of that comes through expertise and confidence in the area you're speaking about. But a lot of it also just comes through those basic interpersonal skills around looking people in the eye and being warm and smiling and inviting and, inviting them to talk. The more someone talks to you about themselves, the closer they feel to you. So giving them the opportunity to do that and sort of focusing on those relationships is really important. And, in your MBA, I found myself thinking a lot about frameworks and sophisticated management techniques. But as you get older, you realise, well, everything's just about people. And the more I can engage with individuals and groups, and the more I can create a vision for the future and articulate my point and rationalise as to why it may be the right direction, openly listen to others so I can take their perspective in mind to come up with a better decision, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the things that I think you really build a career on.
Yeah. Well, I can say you've got some gravitas. I was talking to a colleague last week and I said, I've got the chance to talk to Brad Meehan next week. And she said, I watched one of his keynotes. He's awesome. So
it's nice to hear.
Yeah. So this is something that I strategically chose to not say at the start of the podcast. I had Mike Tristram on as one of our guests. I think he was episode 10. And I re-listened to that episode maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he was talking about his Department of Doom and how it got to be that, they chose that sort of area of dysphagia liquid to go and research. And he went, we worked with Brad at Strativity in the early days. And that was, I thought I'd also mention that because you probably were unaware.
I mean, that's awesome. That's great. It was really important work, and it's probably the single best case study we've got because it's so quantifiable. Trisco being a small business is not our typical client. We mainly work with large blue chips, but a small business is great. You deal directly with the owners of the business, and 5 years later, he said, we've tripled our revenue and tripled our profitability because of the insight you gave us. And, most of it is their ability to execute well, but it's great that mapping work we did to model different markets and give them a steer as to where the value is has paid off. So, that's wonderful. I didn't know that.
Just do the warm and fuzzies. In terms of your area of expertise over the last decade or so with this customer side of things, what does that landscape look like now, and how much has it shifted over that time, in the sense that are companies getting more customer centric, and are they effectively what's what I'm looking for? Are they effectively capitalizing on those opportunities if they're trying to take them?
I'd say the answer is yes. There's more experience and there's larger teams and there's probably increasing levels of sophistication. For most large businesses, it's something you have to work at constantly because the pull to being internally orientated is so strong.
Mm.
You know, you spend your life trying to maximize profit margins and optimize processes and decrease risk, while a customer's assessing value from a totally different perspective. So there's sometimes an inherent conflict there or a perceived one. And, you know, the bigger you are and the more steps removed you are from customers, because especially in those middle management layers, you have to work very hard to deliberately pull that external customer perspective in. So I would say things have improved over the last few years. I always say to the team, we have a skewed sample because the organisations working with us either are forward-thinking enough to think we need some help or are in a bit of trouble and think we need some help. So it's not representative, but I would dare say there's a fair bit of improvement, and there's been a lot of management articles written on this, and the link between experience, satisfaction, advocacy and business value creation is so strong and so well proven that more organisations are investing in this. I'd still say there's a lot of wasted money and effort because there are some core things that tend to work really well, and sometimes organisations are playing with very sophisticated things where they'd be better off getting the foundations right and then building from there. But yeah, definite improvement over the last 15 years.
Yeah. And so if somebody's listening that's, you know, in a position of influence within a business and are looking to try and encourage their organisation to be a bit more customer centric, do you have some starting points aside from the obvious of signing up Strativity to come and help them? Yeah. Are there any tips that you have for people that might be able to start that journey?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing I would generally do is look to build the business case and build some sort of economic linkage. In most businesses, if you know what you're doing, you can build a model that shows the relationship between the experience customers have and their level of satisfaction or advocacy, and the relationship between their satisfaction and advocacy and their behaviour that drives revenue or cost and creates profit. So in most businesses, you can build a model. And I would often approach an executive team not through a customer-centric lens at all, but just through a business opportunity lens. We've done some modelling. It turns out, believe it or not, customers that have better experiences are more likely to spend more, stay longer and refer others. We've quantified how significant that is. And it turns out that if we can move satisfaction or advocacy by 2 percentage points, we should be able to increase revenue or profit. So because we found this opportunity, I'd like to unpack it and work out how we can decrease variation, improve consistency, and maybe start to differentiate through experience. Not in every business you can do that. There's some where the modelling is quite hard, but in most businesses I would start with an economic link. It's just about creating more value. And as an executive team, you've got KPIs generally around value creation. So why wouldn't you want to pull this lever of more consistent experiences that generally pull cost out and improve the sort of customer relationship and spend? But then from there, you want to think about, well, if we agree we should do it, how do we do it? And what makes it such a great area to consult in is because it's pretty complicated. Every aspect of how you operate as a business flows through to impact the experience you deliver. So who you hire has a massive impact, how you induct them, the metrics you use to drive their behaviour, how you do performance reviews, but also the technology you've got in the systems and how easy or difficult it is for customers or employees to integrate or use those systems. Most companies haven't put the effort into clearly defining what an exceptional experience for their brand looks like. And if you haven't done that, I don't think you're any chance of delivering one. So there's another starting point, is getting some clarity around what exactly are we trying to deliver end-to-end for our customers across different journeys and touch points. What memories are we trying to create? What emotions are we trying to elicit? How should it look for them in maybe 2 years? And if you can build that level of detail, you can then work backwards and say, how do we go from something today that's got friction and is inconsistent to something that's, you know, world-class or gives us a competitive advantage? And yeah, there are a few of the starting points I would generally adopt.
Yeah, interesting. And what's the requirement of, say, the necessity of buy-in from leadership? Like the senior leadership executive team, is that a requirement to move the needle enough, or can you actually make a bit of change and a bit of noise without that level of buy-in?
It's always better. It depends on the organisation. Like, the larger the organisation, probably the less important it is to have the CEO involved because, in Commonwealth Bank, you're dealing with someone who's running the retail bank, even if they're not the group CEO. So, look, you'd always rather have a committed CEO who understands the value creation opportunity and the competitive advantage opportunity and gives you some cover and support. But if not, it's really about finding someone that has the motivation and the relationships within the business to help sort of position the story. I think, the biggest challenge is this role of I'm in charge of CX, I'm a one-man band, I have no budget, and my job is to influence the organisation. If you're in that role, we should have a chat. That's a tough gig, and you probably need some help to sort of push up. And if you can avoid that role, that'd be good because without budget and a team, it can be really difficult to drive significant change. But what I'd be looking to do in those instances is get some really good metrics on current experience. Also, do some work around particular friction points or touch points, and then look to demonstrate the improvement you've made and equate it to some sort of commercial value or strategic goal realisation, and then use that story to build support. It's probably a slower path to value, but if it's your only option, it may be the best part.
Yeah. For those listening, he is literally describing me in my current working environment. It's exactly the approach that I'm trying to take anyway. But not to go into that area. Thinking about this is something that we wish we could long forget. The experience of COVID. Did that change anything in the way that you saw people think about the customer, given that the nature of so much service delivery or product delivery changed so rapidly over that period of time? Was there anything in that shifted the narrative, or anything you saw that was of particular interest?
Yeah, it was probably, while the personal life cost and macroeconomic impacts were, significant and unhelpful, of course, for so many people, at a micro level or coming one level down, it probably turbocharged and helped a lot of work around digital transformation and customer experience design. So a lot of organisations were really falling into a trap of everything takes so long to do, and then we realised, well, not really. If you have to do something, you can do it rather quickly. You had a lot of different service channels that were needed to be designed and implemented quickly. A lot of the digital infrastructure got fast-tracked in terms of budget and enthusiasm, and that sort of has a big linkage with customer work, because in my world, you design your experience and then you think about how to deliver it through channels. And, as organisations are investing in infrastructure and trying to move things into different channels and environments, a great opportunity to pause and think about how do we do this in a way that's going to deliver a degree of sort of brand alignment across our experience. So that from that side of things, it was quite positive. And also at a personal level, the impact was super positive because I was doing so much less travel. So when you run we're sort of a boutique consultancy with anywhere between 15 and 25 people, depending on certain projects and skills we need, etc. But, I was up and down Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane constantly. And then all of a sudden everyone got very comfortable with shooting a Teams invite or a Zoom link. And as a result, I'm traveling far less and it's so much more productive. And I've been surprised with how you can build rapport, coming back to one of your earlier points, Ross, with high-definition cameras and multiple meetings. You build genuine friendships. And we've run whole projects with people in New Zealand that I'm very close to that I've never physically been in the same room as. So, some negatives, but lots of positives out of it as well.
Yeah. I mean, just on that point, I travelled down to Melbourne for work last week, and, having been in my organisation now for 18 months, I caught up with some people in the office, ran into them. I didn't know particularly where they were in the office, but I went wandering around and saw them and, had many multiple Teams meetings with them. But to actually see them and everyone's, you basically feel like, you have met each other many times before, and that there is a relationship that exists purely because of a virtual, face-to-face type of interactions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And it's also like looping it back to business too. It's probably helped us open up some global opportunities.
Mm.
So we were engaged by KFC India to help them design and build their digital experience strategy.
Oh, wow.
And we talked about how much travel would be required. And they sort of said, look, we're all in different offices all over India anyway. So most of this work will be virtual via Zoom. Pre-COVID, I don't know if we would have won that project, and I don't know how comfortable they would have felt having an Australian consultancy advise them, without more of a local presence. But I think it helped us win that. And right now we're looking at some projects in Hong Kong and Asia and all abroad now, because it's become less of an issue, which is helpful for an Australian boutique consultancy.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I go to there, and this is going to be a slight tangent, but the work you do, you've obviously got employees who are highly capable, highly intelligent, skilled people. How do you approach leadership within your business? And just, at a high level, and I go, this is a question completely off the cuff and I haven't prepared you for it at all. So feel free to swipe it. But is there a way that you generally think about how, you give autonomy, the Dan Pink mastery and all those bits and pieces?
It's funny because we run leadership training, and we've got some awesome programs around middle and senior management, customer-centric leadership, and how to build a high-performing team. And the difference between a manager and a leader is probably the most significant thing that you can teach in an organisation, because they are so different. But my leadership style is certainly, we hire pretty experienced senior people. So I'm that sort of get out of your way. If something's really blocking you, let me know. There's an awful lot of autonomy. I'll go weeks and weeks without speaking to our senior people because they're capable, and they'll reach out if they need anything. And a lot of them like the role because they've got independence.
Yeah.
So sometimes when people are new or more junior, maybe I'm fighting that micromanagement thing where I'm trying to get a little bit involved in what they're doing because I think they need to learn something. But for most of our people, I'm just sort of give them something that's interesting, trust that I've hired good people, they've been with me a number of years, they know exactly what they're doing, and step back. And if they want to bounce something off someone, I'm there. But a lot of it, we've got really good, maybe it's a testament to something, but we've got really good tenure in our team. So I've got people with me 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and there's strong friendships, strong levels of trust, strong levels of confidence in their attention to detail and sophistication of what they'll do. So I'm usually just reading it after it's sort of gone to the clients, impressed by the work that we've done, and most of that just comes from hiring the right people. Not everyone works out, but if you hire the right people with good experience, they're motivated, they've got the capabilities, then it's more just about setting them up for success and jumping out of the way. But that's because of the nature of business I'm running as well. It's probably different when you're running a large healthcare organisation or something like that. But in our world, that's sort of how I approach it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I appreciate that answer, sort of being thrown at you at the last minute. Look, I've taken up plenty of your time. I'll ask you one last question, and that is based around the reason for the podcast. But success, what does success look like for you? What does it mean for you?
I guess it's multifaceted like it is for most people. So, I'm the classic MBA story. I think there's a stat that within 3 or 4 years of doing an MBA, your salary or your income quadruples or something like that. And, I'm in that boat where if I go back 10 years, it was really fundamental in those 5 years, and it's seen a great jump from where I was at in terms of income to where I'm at today. So that's the financial aspect of success. For me as well, it's working with really good people that become your friends. I value that more and more as I get older. So that's a real measure of success. When I'm at dinner with different team members or jet skiing with people or hanging out with people that are good friends as well as colleagues, I really like that. It's a good vibe. On a personal level, I'm in a bit of a sweet spot. I've got 3 children aged between 10 and 18. And, it's not always a dream, but I'm in a bit of a sweet spot now where they're all very happy and doing well. And you combine that with, a happy wife and a nice family environment and good friends. And then you've got a bit of a spiritual side too. So I'm a Christian myself, Ross, and, having a bit of a connection with God and a church, and that's very grounding as well, and trying to have that sort of spiritual element that feeds the soul, and that relationship there is good. So like most people, I guess you step back and look at it in terms of health and wealth and security and the ability to travel and people that are important to you doing well and being happy, and that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear you're well and the family is doing well, and everything's positive. Because the whole theme of that, I guess the chat so far is working hard to make sure those things happen, because you can't just take them for granted.
And you can also, most people would appreciate that, you build a company and it's highly successful, and you might become a billionaire even, but if you've built that, but you've got these other issues in these other key part of your life, it's hard to feel holistically successful. So it's really about trade-off and balance and things like that. Not saying that I've got it all nailed, of course, but I think that's the way most people look at it these days, and it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, it's the one reason why I love asking the question is to, sort of over time understand how people who are achieving a lot in a career perspective and are performing at very high levels also have a very high regard for the other stuff outside of work. And they're being driven not just because they want to make dollars, but because they want to, provide for their family, or, they want to have an opportunity to connect with people in ways that obviously works for them. So, I think it's one of the best questions that we sort of came up with to ask during this period.
It's a great one.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, is there anything else, I guess, you wanted to share before we call it a day?
No, not really. Look, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my story, and it was good to meet you, and I'm glad this sort of popped up, and I hope there's some helpful snippets in there for any listeners, and really appreciate the opportunity, Ross.